Day 2, Episode 4. Again, I'm just trying to... When I have time to do it, the house is quiet. I don't need to worry about any interruptions. So if you're wondering, wow, he has the same shirt, it's because I did these back to back to back. But that one revelation that God's recently given me is in Genesis. And it's actually with Jacob. So, for those who don't know, Jacob's father-in-law cheats him numerous times. And I'm talking numerous times. And one thing that I think is funny about the story of Jacob, this is my cat Mabel. Hi, Mabel. Say hi, Mabel. Let's turn the video to Mabel. Yes. Cute cat alert. She's trying to dodge, but I want her. Okay. She's not used to the spinning. She's now afraid of the spinning. But one thing funny about Jacob is a lot of people think Jacob stole something numerous times, or Jacob tricked because he was like, no. First thing that people think Jacob stole was Esau's birthright. Esau sold it for beans or lentil soup. Jacob didn't steal anything. And they say, well, the mother had him trick his father. Well, that's God doing and giving Esau exactly what Esau asked, which is just give up his birthright for lentil soup. You see, Jacob was a smart boy. He read books. He was a meek person. So he read many books, so I'm sure he knew the stories. And I'm sure he saw the dots. Okay? God goes with is always with the firstborn in the New Testament, for the most part. Until Jacob, God's with the firstborn. Everyone, Abraham, Isaac, all did good. They all were wealthy and had many lands and many kiddos. Jacob saw that. And I'm sure, to be completely honest, I think what happened was what normally happens, which is your brother says something, you say, oh, right, bet. And your brother takes it up, and then you're right, and then except your brother doesn't pay out, but this time God's like, okay, fine. Esau's not going to pay up, I'm going to make him pay up. God's the birthright. I don't know if Jacob knew that. I have a feeling that he was smart enough to know that. But God knew that. God was a birthright. He was the first, because he was with Abraham the first, the eldest. With Jacob, the eldest. God's the birthright for the eldest son. Well, Esau gave that up. Went for lentil soup. Now again, they were wealthy. They had bread. And the reason why I say that is because he said he's starving. Eat bread. Bread is one of the most filling things. But no, he wanted lentil soup. So I think it's funny how people said that he stole. No. Jacob got what Esau gave up. He got the actual deal. He was actually paid out what he was owed. And God made sure of it. And God used Jacob's mother to do that. I think it was Rebecca. Was it Rebecca? To actually fulfill the deal. So Jacob didn't steal anything. He was given what he deserved, which was the birthright, which was God. Fast forward, he finds this woman that he fancies. And it wasn't. So he makes a deal with the dad. He says, I'll work 7 years. Well, Jacob gets tricked and gets the eldest and goes, I wanted the youngest. Because that's who I fell in love with. That was love at first sight. And then he says, all right, fine. Finish the week with with my eldest, out of respect, and not to disgrace her, and then I'll give you my second. But then you have to work 7 years. Continue as my herdsman, as my shepherd. And Jacob's like, okay, fine. And then but he said, but then I want my own sheep. And the deal was, okay, the father said, okay, fine. But you can't have the white sheep. You have to have blotted, spot, or streaked and striped and brown sheep, because the white sheep were considered the best wool because you could dye them, and they were considered pure, so perfect for sacrifices and everything. So the father had his sons take all the sheep, all the striped, spotted, and brown sheep, and took them away. So now here is Jacob with a bunch of white sheep. And now he has to raise white sheep, which will only be his father-in-law's sheep. And then genetics happens. For those who don't know, remember the box from like middle school, 8th grade, or high school or middle school, where you have like the eye color and all that? Well, if you keep mating the animals or people with the same pool, mutations happen. The closer the relation, the more plausible mutations occur or manifest. So what Jacob did was pretty much Pavlov. And this is what I love. Jacob saw that when the female sheep were in heat, they would drink water. Well, male sheep knew, oh, okay, and then they would have relations, for lack of a better term, always at the trough, always at the water trough. Jacob saw this and goes, okay, so here's what he did. He made a striped and / spotted kind of picket, and he would put it in the trough when they would mate. Now, if we remember Pavlov, he saw a reaction with the dogs. The dogs would drool, right? Whenever there was food. There's a trigger, and that was a reaction. The trigger for the lambs was they're in heat, they get thirsty. That's when the males would mount. Okay, so that's the trigger. Then, well, just like Pavlov, Jacob swapped the trigger from the trough to the sign that he made. Now, Jacob was in control of when and who would mate. And eventually, through this method, he was able to get strong, striped, dotted, and brown sheep, all while keeping his father-in-law's sheep frail and weak and white, or pure. And later on, it actually says, Jacob actually admits that he didn't have this idea. God gave him that idea in a dream. He saw that only the striped, spotted, and brown sheep would mate, and none of the white sheep would. So pretty much, God showed Jacob Pavlov's effect, or Pavlov's theory. Instead of bells and food, Jacob used a striped sign that he made and a water trough, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, because that's centuries before. So technically, Pavlov isn't an originator. He's copying what Jacob did, which God gave him, which I think is hilarious and amazing, because if you think about it, that's centuries ahead of anything. That's centuries, maybe even millennia ahead. I don't know the exact terminology, but that blew my mind. Like, oh my gosh, he Pavloved them. Jacob Pavloved these sheep without realizing he was Pavloving them. Because he saw a habit, a trigger, and then he changed the trigger. He introduced a new trigger and was able to control the action, just as Pavlov did, except with sheep And it also states that Jacob separated sheep. Now, once again, of course, at the end of this, after Jacob served his years that he promised, they said that Jacob cheated and stole his father's sheep. No. Jacob did exactly what he was supposed to do and is completely justified. He didn't do anything. He still took care of his sheep, still fed them, ensured they made it. Jacob just took his own sheep, and with his own sheep, he pretty much changed. He helped his own sheep. He made his own flock. And with his own flock, he kept control, and he was watching over his own flock. And his father's flock it's pretty amazing. And God showed him that. God showed him how to do that in a dream. And he even says all this. But if you still ask some people how Jacob cheated and tricked, Jacob, funny enough, didn't trick anyone. As I say with Esau, he didn't trick Esau. Esau gave up his birthright. They just forgot about that. The lentil soup. The blessing was the birthright. God's blessing and his father's blessing is the birthright. Having God and being in a relationship with God was and is the blessing. That is the birthright. Jacob knew that. I don't know if Jacob knew that, but that's the truth. That's why God was with Jacob and not with Esau. And also, here's a big thing. Esau cried. It said he wept bitterly. And here's the thing though. There is only, from what I remember, there's only two people who are said to weep bitterly. First one's Esau. Esau weeps bitterly, then marries outside the tribe. When God told Isaac that he doesn't want them to do that because the other tribe believed in other gods and other idols, and they would sacrifice their babies and do other despicable things. They would sin. Esau thought, okay, no, fine. I'm going to go back into sin. He never repented. He never went back. He doubled down in his sin, in his disgrace. This is why it says, and God despised Esau, because Esau never repented. He doubled down. And also, for God hating Esau, fast forward, Esau had many kids. In fact, he had as much as Joseph did. They both grew so big, so quickly. Both their tribes grew so much so that they lost space. God still blesses us. He will. And I don't know if Esau ever repented, but God will listen to his called and who serve him. And he listens, and Esau may not have repented, but only God blessed Esau because Isaac asked God to. Isaac asked God to. And because Isaac asked God, God's like, okay, fine. I'll do it because God. Isaac, why did I ask that? Okay, now, because I love you, Isaac, so much. I love you so much, and you were so good and faithful. Okay, Esau will get. Not that God despises the wicked. He even says God does not take glee. He does not take joy in a wicked person dying. Actually, he hates it. He despises it. That's why it breaks his heart. But Jacob gave God the glory, trusted in God, and kept his word. Jacob did not lie at all. He served the 7 years, was cheated, got the daughter, served another 7 years, and was still said that he cheated. He didn't. So sometimes, even when we do the right thing, it may feel like people will say we cheated, or we may not understand. We may feel like it's not like as good as we thought it would be. But in the end, we do good not to get something, not to be blessed, but because we are blessed. Because God is the blessing. God is the birthright. Every birthright for every human is to serve God, is to have a relationship with God. And if you don't have that, you lost your birthright. That's why we struggle. That's why we suffer, is because we're not doing what we should be doing in serving God. I mean, Ecclesiastes. Man's purpose is to serve God. It's literally the be-all, end-all of man, is to obey and serve God. So that was, I thought, a fun revelation for me that God blessed me with, was Jacob used Pavlov for Pavlov. And for Pavlov to actually prove, and actually funny enough, Pavlov proves the Bible here, because he literally does the same exact thing Jacob did, who was told by God to do this, which is see this behavior, see the trigger. If you change the trigger, you'll be able to control the behavior. And pretty much swapping food for in heat and procreation, or from food to water and procreation, swapping food with water, drooling with procreation, being the trigger to swapping the trigger to being from a bell to a sign, which allowed him to control the behavior and get the results that he desired. I did a terrible way of re-explaining that, but pretty much Jacob did Pavlov, Jacob's original Pavlov, which call it Jacob's, Jacob's not hypothesis, because it's actual, whatever it's called. Rambled. I hope this one wasn't really much faith-driven, just more of like a fun revelation that God gave me. I love it because I love psychology, and this is just an interesting thing that, again, I've read many times. I don't know how many times I've read that excerpt of Genesis, and I've heard this spoken about many times. And now only am I realizing, now it wasn't until when God showed me that revelation that he also showed me that Jacob was not cheated. Jacob got what he was owed by God and from God, because God moved his mother to help him trick his father to get the blessing, which is the birthright, the first birthright. And God showed Jacob how to get the sheep, which was his right in the deal he made with his father-in-law, who tried to cheat him. So pretty much, God will intervene when he needs to intervene. But he intervenes always, but he'll always be there, and he'll always be there for us in the big times. And sometimes if we don't know it ourselves, he'll either tell us or he'll have someone help us to find out what we need to do. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you stayed with me this whole entire time. I hope you come back. If I don't see you again, I pray you have a wonderful life, and I pray to see you in heaven. Amen.